You were never excessively sensitive. Instead, you were simply hyper-aware in a world that sought to keep you complacent. They don't resort to shouting. They don't engage in physical aggression. They don't even elevate their vocal tone. Yet through some inexplicable means, they still instill in you a pervasive sense of inadequacy. You feel overlooked, as if you occupy too much space. You exit the room, enveloped in a silence that is not inherently yours. Your shoulders are tense, your jaws clenched, and an insidious thought begins to insinuate itself. Perhaps the issue lies with me. However, Carl Jung recognized this pattern long before contemporary psychology affixed a formal designation to it. He understood that individuals who have not confronted their own shadow aspects will invariably inflict harm upon others, doing so subtly and adeptly through acts of omission, dismissal, and emotional withdrawal. Moreover, if you remain oblivious to your own behavioral patterns, you will persistently invite this dynamic into your life, repeatedly, under the misguided belief that you are merely unfortunate, undeserving of affection, or overly emotional. But permit me to pose a question to you. What if every individual who inflicted pain upon you was not a reflection of your inherent worth, but rather an embodiment of what you have been conditioned to endure? Jung did not merely furnish us with theoretical frameworks, he provided us with prescient warnings. And 44 of these warnings have been silently clamoring within the unspoken narratives of every heartbreak you have managed to overcome. If you remain unaware of these 44 fundamental truths, people will continue to cause you distress, and they will not even experience remorse for their actions. This is because pain, once it becomes deeply ingrained and familiar, effectively becomes imperceptible. Let us commence with the inaugural truth, designated as truth number 1. If you fail to delineate your intrinsic value, others will inevitably diminish it. Each instance in which you remain mute when you ought to articulate your thoughts, when you disregard your own fundamental requirements to circumvent discord, when you prioritize another person's comfort above your authentic self, you inadvertently construct a reality where your inherent worth is subject to negotiation. Truth number 2 states that those who derive benefit from your silence will invariably label your assertiveness as selfish. The precise moment you commence articulating your needs, a strong adverse reaction will ensue. They will contend that you have undergone a transformation, that you have become difficult, that you are no longer the same person. However, it is not your authenticity they despise. It is their perceived loss of dominion. Truth number 3 reveals that the shadow is not inherently malevolent. It merely represents unexpressed power. That suppressed anger you consistently harbor, that visceral intensity you feel when someone disrespects you, these are not deficiencies. They are sacred protective mechanisms. Your shadow is not endeavoring to destroy you. It is actively seeking to safeguard you. Truth number 4 emphasizes that individuals do not genuinely register what you articulate verbally. Rather, they react to what you implicitly permit. You can unequivocally state, "Do not address me in that manner." However, if you remain present when they repeat the behavior, your energetic acquiescence nullifies your spoken words. Boundaries that are not substantiated by corresponding actions are merely empty noise. Truth number 5 posits that every apology you offer for having been wounded constitutes a lesson in self-effacement. You have uttered it far too frequently. "Sorry, I'm simply exhausted. Forgive me if I'm overreacting." Yet Jung would inquire, why do you persistently apologize for your suffering? What aspect of your being was indoctrinated to believe that experiencing emotions is a burden? Truth number 6 asserts that trauma instructs you to perceive love in the identical configuration as your survival mechanisms. If love was equated with appeasement, adaptation, and diminishment, then that is the form of love you will instinctively pursue. However, it is not genuine love. It is familiar pain camouflaged and perpetually reenacted. Truth number 7 proclaims that if someone's affection necessitates your betrayal of yourself, it is not love. It is a transactional arrangement, a covert bargain. In this agreement, you consistently incur loss every time you consent to that which diminishes you, merely to preserve a semblance of peace that is fundamentally illusory. Truth number 8 illustrates that the facade you adopt in order to be loved ultimately transforms into a confinement. Your outwardly easygoing demeanor, your reputation for perpetual availability, your forced smile when you yearn to weep. This strategy functions effectively until you lose sight of your authentic identity beneath the pretense. Truth number 9 elucidates that emotional labor performed without reciprocal exchange constitutes exploitation. You offer solace, meticulously explain every detail, provide emotional space, absorb the emotional impact, and they categorize it as love. But inquire of yourself, what do you receive in recompense? Because love that flows exclusively in one direction is not devotion, it is sheer depletion. Truth number 10 states that you instruct individuals on how to treat you by what you permit to occur more than once. The initial instance might be an unintentional error. However, if they repeat the action repeatedly, the responsibility no longer rests solely with them. At that point, your silence grants them tacit authorization. Truth number 11 cautions that not every individual who comprehends you is deserving of access to your inner world. Even individuals with toxic tendencies can grasp your essence, understand your past experiences, and echo your sentiments. However, insight devoid of integrity is merely manipulation expertly disguised. Simply because someone perceives your soul does not imply they should be entrusted with its safeguarding. Truth number 12 reassures you that you are not overly sensitive. You are merely, at long last, heeding the signals from your nervous system. That visceral sensation of unease in your abdomen, that sudden drain of energy following a phone conversation, that compelling urge to retreat, these are not manifestations of anxiety. They are the undeniable whispers of truth permeating your physical being. Truth number 13 declares that unwavering loyalty to dysfunction is not a virtue. It is a conditioned response. You remain, you absolve, you rationalize. But Jung would pose the question, are you truly loyal or merely fearful? Fearful of loss, of metamorphosis, of solitude? Yet persisting in a state of suffering does not render you loyal. It renders you utterly adrift. Truth number 14 asserts that if someone's affection for you is contingent upon your being effortlessly lovable, it is not love, it is consumption. The instant you fall ill, articulate a refusal, or express dissent, they withdraw their presence. This is not a rejection, it is an unveiling. They were not genuinely present for you, they were present for your silence. Truth number 15 reveals that excessive explanation is a trauma response masquerading as logical reasoning. When you experience the compulsion to justify, defend, or elucidate what should be patently obvious, it is not about the other person. It is about your ingrained apprehension that clarity will render you unlovable. And this truly is merely the genesis. Allow me to recount a narrative. There once was a young woman, inherently quiet, soft-spoken, the type who instinctively minimized her presence in any setting. She invariably assumed the role of peacemaker, the agreeable one, the individual who permitted others to interrupt, the one who feigned amusement at unfunny jokes solely to avert awkwardness. However, one particular day, during a conversation that escalated into hostility, she did not offer a laugh. She did not nod in agreement. She did not provide an explanation. Instead, she firmly stated, "Do not address me in that manner." And then she departed. Her legs trembled uncontrollably. Her chest felt constricted. Yet she continued to walk, because she had finally grasped the profound realization that being understood is not synonymous with being secure. Jung held the conviction that every individual must undergo a symbolic demise, specifically the demise of the false self. That young woman, she interred the iteration of herself who erroneously believed that endurance equated to love. And what emerged in her stead? A person no longer concerned with being palatable. Allow me to pose a question to you. When did you first assimilate the notion that remaining silent was a safer course of action than being authentically yourself? Reflect deeply on that moment. Perhaps it was the particular tone employed by a parent, or a teacher's disapproving glare. It could have been the friend who suddenly ceased communication the moment your emotional distress became too overwhelming. That specific juncture in your life marked the realization that articulating your genuine self carried inherent risks. It was then that your authentic voice retreated into concealment. And from that pivotal day onward, individuals gained the capacity to inflict harm upon you through subtle, manipulative, and outwardly sophisticated methods, precisely because the innate part of you that should have vehemently protested had been effectively tranquilized. However, it is far from being too late, as these subsequent 15 profound insights are not intended to cultivate bitterness within you. Their fundamental purpose is to awaken your awareness. And at this juncture, we will proceed to meticulously unveil the next 15 profound truths concerning the phenomena of projection, narcissism, the establishment of emotional boundaries, and the strategic methods to neutralize those individuals who weaponize empathy. You have persevered and reached this stage. Do not cease your journey now, because once you have assimilated all 44 of these fundamental truths, you will not merely cease to experience emotional pain. You will transcend the haunting presence of the past version of yourself who endured everything, solely for the desire to feel valued and accepted. They will invariably remark that you have undergone a transformation, not because you have adopted a cruel demeanor, but rather because you have achieved profound clarity. And in a world that thrives upon disorientation and ambiguity, clarity inherently represents a form of confrontation. You will begin to articulate no, not with excessive volume, but with unwavering consistency. You will cease to provide immediate responses. You will no longer offer apologies for the inflection or quality of your voice. You will discontinue diminishing your own presence to elevate the perceived significance of others. And abruptly, you will be labeled as difficult, not because you have committed any transgression, but because you have ceased engaging in behaviors that previously served to validate their sense of correctness. Carl Jung once cautioned us that the moment an individual embarks upon the journey of reclaiming their shadow, that unacknowledged, unintegrated aspect of their self, their energetic resonance undergoes a significant alteration. And individuals who previously benefited from your self-suppression will perceive this shift as an existential threat. Not consciously, not always with malicious intent, but on a deeply visceral level, because your newly established boundaries will resonate as an act of betrayal to those who had only ever known you through your silence. Let us resume our discussion precisely where we concluded previously. Truth number 16. The process of healing will render you unrecognizable to individuals who exclusively knew you in a state of brokenness. They will assert that you have fundamentally changed, and they are indeed correct in that observation. However, what they genuinely imply is that you are no longer easily exploitable. Truth number 17. If the affection you share is not permitted to evolve and adapt, it will inevitably reach its expiration point. Relationships do not succumb to mere disagreements. They perish when one individual commences a journey of personal growth and the other steadfastly refuses to accommodate or adapt to that development. Love that remains static is love that undergoes a silent, insidious deterioration. Truth number 18. Individuals will express apprehension regarding your boundaries when they have previously profited from your absence of them. They will characterize you as cold, reserved, or even harsh. Nevertheless, this is merely a manifestation of projection. What they are truly communicating is that your newfound self-respect now imposes limitations upon their capacity for control. Truth number 19. When you cease to engage in excessive explanations, manipulators consequently lose their manipulative leverage. They thrive on ambiguity, on interminable discussions that serve to deplete your energy. However, once your truth becomes an unyielding, non-negotiable principle, they fall silent, because clarity, at that point, transcends mere conversation. It becomes an impenetrable barrier. Truth number 20. Empathy is truly a valuable attribute only when it is safeguarded by judicious discernment. You have been excessively generous with your compassion towards individuals who perceive it as a transactional commodity. You experience their suffering with greater intensity than your own. Yet love devoid of discernment constitutes a binding agreement for self-annihilation. Truth number 21. The profound desire to be comprehended can lead you to tolerate circumstances that are, in fact, intolerable. You persist in your attempts to elucidate your perspective to individuals who are resolutely committed to misunderstanding you. However, the core issue is not your clarity, it is their ingrained comfort with their preconceived notions. Truth number 22. When an individual transgresses your boundary and subsequently reacts with offense, You have effectively exposed their underlying sense of entitlement. Healthy individuals adapt their behavior when you articulate a need. Unhealthy individuals, conversely, retaliate, not because your boundary is inherently flawed, but because they never harbored any intention of respecting it in the first place. Truth number 23. You bear no responsibility for the emotional reactions of individuals whom you have outgrown. Guilt will subtly whisper, be gentler, be kinder. However, personal growth is not synonymous with cruelty. It is the embodiment of clarity. And if your personal evolution causes them distress, it was never your inherent obligation to diminish yourself to accommodate their limitations. Truth number 24. Individuals do not depart when you become toxic. They depart when you cultivate self-respect. Observe closely. The precise moment you commence advocating for yourself, people will inexplicably vanish. Not because your actions are erroneous, but because you are no longer easily managed or appeased. Truth number 25. Your triggers are not inherent flaws. They function as invaluable messengers. When someone asserts that you are overly reactive, Jung would inquire, what past memory has just been activated? Your emotional response is not a defect. It is crucial information. Truth number 26. Projection occurs when an individual accuses you of embodying the very characteristic they are too apprehensive to confront within themselves. They will label you as manipulative when you establish a boundary. They will deem you selfish when you request personal space. Yet frequently, what they perceive in you is precisely what they refuse to acknowledge within their own being. Truth number 27. Certain individuals are addicted to your dysfunction because it serves to validate their own. You are perceived as easy to be around when you are anxious, when you harbor self-doubt, or when you exhibit excessive generosity. However, the instant you embark on a path of healing, they feel exposed. This is because your newfound clarity renders their inherent chaos more difficult to disregard. Truth number 28. When an individual retracts affection as a punitive measure, it was never genuine love. It was merely a form of leverage. You have undoubtedly experienced it, the sudden cold shoulder after you expressed dissent, the deafening silence when you firmly maintained your position. That was not love receding, that was control collapsing. Truth number 29. You are not obligated to offer an explanation for your boundary. Your sole responsibility is to enforce it. They will inquire as to the reasons, press for justifications, and attempt to engage in debate. However, this is not a legal proceeding. Your boundary is not a subject for discussion. It is a door, locked and definitively closed. Truth number 30. You do not owe anyone continued access to a particular version of yourself that they feel entitled to. You have matured. You have transformed. You no longer find humor in the same jokes. You no longer pursue things with the same fervor you once did. That is not an act of rudeness. It is a personal revolution. Allow me to illustrate a concept that Jung deeply comprehended, yet seldom articulated directly. Every human soul possesses a gravitational pull, a psychological orbit that attracts circumstances congruent with its fundamental self-concept. Therefore, if your intrinsic belief is, I must be easy to love, you will unconsciously seek out individuals who demand difficulty as a prerequisite for impression. If your internal mantra is, I do not deserve an abundance, you will invariably settle for those who provide just enough to perpetuate your self-doubt. The universe does not simply bestow upon you what you desire. It mirrors precisely who you believe yourself to be. Consequently, we will now unveil the concluding 14 truths, including strategies for safeguarding your energy from subtle predators, methods to cease trauma bonding with individuals who reflect your own wounds, and approaches to cultivating such an unshakable sense of self-respect that chaos no longer possesses the means to gain entry into your life. Because you are nearing the culmination of this journey, and when you have assimilated all 44 truths, not merely intellectually, but viscerally within your being, you will cease to conflate mere survival with genuine connection. You will cease to expend your emotional energy on unrequited affections, and you will, at long last, comprehend the profound sensation of completeness. Let us bring this profound journey to its conclusion, For these final 14 revelations transcend mere endurance. They pertain to the absolute autonomy of your being. Truth 31. Your newfound tranquility will inevitably agitate those whose comfort hinges upon your disarray. The more serene you become, the more vociferously they will react. They can no longer locate you within the familiar patterns of your past behavior. Your quietude, once misconstrued as subservience, has now transmuted into an impenetrable bulwark, and this transformation incenses them. Truth 32. Should you find yourself compelled to implore someone to grasp your perspective, it signifies their deliberate commitment to misinterpret you. Genuine clarity does not necessitate theatrical displays. You should never be relegated to performing for affection. Truth 33. Certain individuals harbor no desire for resolution. Their sole objective is control. They will instigate, defer, and divert, not with the intention of rectifying matters, but to perpetuate their dominion. Carl Jung astutely observed that when an individual fears their own subconscious, they invariably seek to govern yours instead. Truth 34. The most insidious form of gaslighting occurs when you inflict it upon yourself. You might utter, "Perhaps I am overly sensitive. Perhaps I am demanding too much." Yet critically examine the genesis of that internal monologue. Who instilled in you the belief that suffering is a natural state? Truth 35. Self-abnegation manifests in myriad guises: unwavering loyalty, selfless sacrifice, spiritual devotion, profound love. However, if your continued connection necessitates your self-effacement, that is not true devotion. It is rather a deep-seated spiritual wound masquerading as a virtuous trait. Truth of 36. You are not inherently problematic. You are simply no longer willing to silently self-destruct. Allow them to label you as they wish. Such epithets cannot adhere to individuals who possess an unshakable understanding of their own truth. Truth 37. Individuals who have never established personal boundaries will invariably perceive yours as an act of cruelty. And this is perfectly acceptable. Their discomfort is not your burden to bear. You were not born to shoulder the responsibility for their emotional comprehension. Truth 38. Manipulators erroneously conflate empathy with entitlement. They operate under the misguided assumption that if you comprehend their situation, you are thereby obligated to them. However, understanding someone's circumstances does not imply a mandate to tolerate their behavior. Truth 39. You possess the capacity to love someone profoundly and simultaneously choose yourself entirely. This is not an act of selfishness. It is, in fact, sacred. Love does not entail the forfeiture of your identity. Rather, it signifies becoming so replete that you radiate abundance, rather than experiencing depletion. Truth 40. If your absence causes them greater distress than your suffering ever did, then that was not love. It was mere dependency. They did not genuinely miss you. They missed the iteration of you that made no demands. Truth 41. The more you heal, the less captivating you become to those who thrive on drama. They will accuse you of being aloof, of having undergone a fundamental change, of being disengaged. And they would be correct, because chaos no longer feels like a sanctuary. Truth of 42. If their conception of love requires your utter exhaustion, it is not love. It is a performance. You are not destined to audition for affection. You are meant to be embraced exactly as you are. Truth 43. Certain individuals forge connections through shared traumas rather than through aligning values. And when you embark upon your healing journey, that bond inevitably fractures. They did not genuinely love you. They loved your suffering. And when you cease to bleed, they depart. Truth 44. The ultimate expression of self-respect lies in quietly and completely disengaging, without any need for them to comprehend your reasons. You do not require closure. You do not need a final pronouncement. You do not need to be proven right. You simply need to be finished. Allow me to illustrate what this looks like. You awaken one morning, devoid of the compulsion to scrutinize your phone, not to ascertain if they have responded, not to reread past exchanges, not to meticulously plan your next communication, because something deep within you has, at last, settled. This cessation arises not from bitterness, but from crystalline clarity. You recognize that the apology never materialized. The respect was never authentic. The love was always conditional. And instead of spiraling into despair, you simply breathe. You rise, prepare your tea, and bask in the morning light. You crave neither vengeance, nor validation, nor explanation. You simply feel whole. This is the silent marvel. Carl Jung spoke of the moment your self-identity becomes disentangled from how others perceive you because you have unflinchingly confronted your own reflection. Allow me to pose this question. What is the true cost of remaining diminished, of prioritizing pleasantries over honesty, of ensuring their comfort while your very soul suffocates? You have been conditioned to dread the repercussions of truth. But what of the ramifications of silence? Carl Jung once famously declared, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Yet that profound privilege is earned through the crucible of grief, through the arduous process of shedding, through the inevitable disappointment of every individual who cherished only your facade. You stand here now. You have recalled these fundamental truths. You have discerned the recurring patterns. You have ceased to erroneously equate pain with loyalty. And now something entirely new begins. You become magnetic, not to everyone, but specifically to those who recognize authenticity, who have undertaken their own internal shadow work, who are unafraid of your depth, who honor your refusal as much as your affirmation. Your existence becomes lighter, not because the burdens lessen, but because you have stopped shouldering what was never yours to carry. Your days grow quieter, not because you are isolated, but because chaos no longer intrudes, and your soul's voice amplifies, not through words, but through sheer presence. Because this is the profound significance of internalizing all 44 truths. You are no longer available for self-erasure. You no longer mistake mere survival for genuine connection. You no longer confuse unfulfilled potential with a true partnership. And you will never again expend your essence seeking external validation. You live, you breathe, you find repose. And in your repose, you ascend.